Hello, people. We're just getting here a little bit early to set up. No, we're not quite in phase one. I mean, technically, we're closed till March 24th. There's some lift of restrictions. We weren't able, for instance, to go to state parks here for a bit, and now we're able to. So at least people can get out in the field and climb, which is great. But that's not technically phase one. A lot of businesses have curbside service and delivery, but that's been maintained through the closure. But we're just trying to see how this goes down. The governor and the health department want to keep us closed till May 24th. The state legislature would like us to be open yesterday, so they're fighting it out. So,
wow,
it seems to be a lot of support for, for maintaining public health, at least in Madison and Milwaukee, which will make a big difference. But awesome.
Interesting.
Let me get Max back here. Welcome, everybody. See you showing up. We're just getting set up here. We've got Kitty here on the line. We got Max here. It's 7 p.m. Kitty's coming to us live from Kauai, which we're having some poke tonight from Miko Poke here in Madison in celebration of Kitty being in Kauai. It's a lovely place to be. But Kitty, really appreciate you showing up. We were talking about the story here earlier. We first met in 1986 or so, and it made such a huge impression on me because you just come over from the Himalayas, and you had this monster epic. And the thing I remember most is still nursing the mother of all rope burns, which probably anybody's least favorite injury ever. And you were just so tough about it. It's a story that you need to tell to do it justice, but it's one of those epics that I've always looked back on inspired with how casual you were with a rope burn that went down to your bone and your arm pretty much, just doing the things you do. And so it's been great to have you over the years come to Madison and host events with Chicks Climbing. We hope to have you back for that. So just put a bug in your ear about that. So hopefully you'll come and set up camp at Devil's Lake again. But I don't want to take too much time except to thank you for being part of the Boulder sessions. They're timeless stories for our times, and you've lived a lifetime of those stories. So we're all looking forward to you telling us some tonight. So thank you for that. I really appreciate it. So I'm going to step out and let you two talk, but thanks so much.
Okay, thanks, Brad. Thanks for inviting me.
Awesome. Thank you, Brad. And thanks everybody for joining us today. So before we get started, like Brad mentioned, so our food experience for tonight is Miko Poke. Delicious. If you guys haven't had poke before, you should. I'm sure there's a lot freshly available where you are in Kauai right now, probably, Kitty.
Oh, yeah.
If we have a couple things that you guys can, so this entire session is in support of Protect Our Winters, which is an organization that Kitty works with. We'll have donation links up on our Facebook page where you can donate directly to POW. Also, we'll talk about some political support that you can give for the fight against climate change that Kitty also supports through Patagonia Access or Action Works. And then we also are still selling some of the t-shirts that we had from last week's session with John Long, the Touching the Void shirts, and all the profits from those will go to POW as well. Without further ado, though, we can start chatting here. So Kitty is an accomplished alpinist, mountaineer, climbs some incredible peaks. She's also part owner of Chicks Climbing and Skiing, which Brad had just mentioned before, where she has graced our presence in our local Devil's Lake spot that we all love here too. She's also received the American Alpine Club prestigious Underhill Award, which is awesome. She's a Patagonia ambassador, spokesperson for Protect Our Winters. Welcome, Kitty.
Thanks for having me. I'm pretty stoked right now. Just a lot of ideas have been going through my head in terms of what I wanted to say this evening and stories that I want to tell. So, and especially in light of some news that I got today. So it's, I feel I'm pretty fired up.
That's awesome. Great. Yeah, we need people fired up, especially in the fight against climate change. It's something that we all kind of have to unify against here. Do you want to start out just kind of telling us about, so you did a TED Talk a few years back where you kind of came up with the concept of last ascents. Do you want to kind of tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, I do. So, first of all, I'd like to say that, right now, I'm sure people's minds are on this conflict we have between staying healthy and opening up the economy and our businesses. And climate change may not be the first thing that you think about when you wake up in the morning. And I get that. But there are some huge things that are going on right now associated with with this whole COVID um, issue that we're dealing with that have a lot of relevancy towards climate change. So I'm excited to explain that as I go along. So anyway, what I wanted to do was start with, it sounded like Brad was really eager for me to tell stories, like as many stories as I could squeeze in an hour,
Yes, please. Yes, please.
So I thought what I would do is start out with the story when I met him. And so that was actually in 1987. We went to climb Dhaulagiri, and it's like the sixth highest peak in the world in Nepal. And there were four of us, myself, John Culberson, Matt Culberson, and Colin Grissom. None of us had ever tried to climb an 8,000 meter peak before. I was the only one who had even seen one. And we did this, we wanted to climb, it would be the second ascent of the east face of Dhaulagiri. It was a thin ice sliver that bisected the face that had first been climbed by McIntyre and Kurtika. We were going alpine style. We were going fast and light. Our expedition only cost us $3,500 a piece, including airfare. So we hiked in to base camp. It took us a couple weeks. We shared 40 porters with a Spanish team that was going to climb the standard route, the Northeast Ridge. There was already a team of Japanese there who were also going to climb the Northeast Ridge, the standard route. So we found out right away that, well, see, our route went up through the ice fall the same way as these other expeditions. And then they continued up the Northeast Ridge, and we would get to this col and traverse on to the bottom of the east face. So first of all, we had to get permission to share this route through the ice fall with the Japanese. And well, we were going fast and light. They had fixed lines and ladders. We hadn't anticipated a need for all this. And the Spanish were sick. So we said, oh, well, we'll set you up. So we went over to the Japanese and said, well, we'd like to help the Spanish through the ice fall, but we need ropes and ladders. And they said, okay, you can have these ropes and ladders. So anyway, we got up through the ice fall. So we got to up through the ice fall, and then we got to where now we're going to get to see the route for the first time ever, because we had to sort of come in from the back, circumnavigate the mountain to get to our base camp. So we'd never actually gotten to see the east face, except for in pictures. And so we got up to the pass, and I'd been planning this trip. Well, it's fast and light trip. So I'd been planning it for a few months, and but just, that was what I was dreamed about every night, and I was super excited. And so, I enroped for my teammates, and I started running as fast as I could in that soft snow at that altitude to just, go see, my dream and come true. And the east face was coming into view, and I didn't see any ice, and I kept running, and there was no ice. And finally I got to the edge of the pass where the whole entire east face came into view, and there was only running water.
Oh, wow.
Over like these, like they were like roof tiles, and it hadn't frozen up, hadn't been cold enough. Not there. Wow. And so I was pretty devastated, because I didn't really want to just climb the standard route. That didn't have any technical appeal to me. And so, but I'm just like, well, okay, what are we going to do now? So we decided, well, we'll try to climb the Northeast Ridge the standard route to get acclimatized, and then we'll come down, and maybe the east face will be frozen. We could climb it then. So we had to get permission from the Japanese to climb the Northeast Ridge. So we went over there, and that day, actually, the Japanese were fixing their route, and they had gotten caught in an avalanche, and they were all back at advance, or at the pass at the camp. And none of them were hurt, but they're pretty shook up. So, I said, hey, can we share your route? And they said, yeah, but you break trail tomorrow. So like, okay. So we were going to be the guinea pigs, right?
Oh, God.
So we climbed up above their high point. We were near their high point, and we were on clipped into their fixed lines through a lock and beater and a harness, and then we were gonna, once we got above the end of their fixed lines, we were just gonna start breaking trail, right? And so we were at the top of their high point. John and Colin were above me. Matt wasn't with us that day, and all of a sudden the slope broke, and it turned into an avalanche. And it wasn't a big slope, but it pulled us down the north face, which was super steep. So we're tumbling down super fast, and I went straight into self-arrest and to try to stop our fall. And then the rope came tight, and so then it jerked me off my feet. So I went back into self-arrest again as fast as I could, but that time when the rope came tight, it pulled me off really hard and fast, and that was the end, So I was tumbling down the slope, and I put my arms over my head to try to protect it, and then the next thing I knew, we came to a stop, and we'd fallen about 350, 400 feet, and the rope was anchored to the snow with 8 snow pickets or snow anchors, and the top 7 had ripped out one by one, and the bottom one held our fall.
Oh my gosh.
So yeah, we were pretty shook up, but we weren't hurt. Well, we were a little bit. I had this total rope burn that went all through all my layers of clothes. And then, yeah, you could see like everything down into the very bone, and some other, like black eye and swollen knee, stuff like that. But we ended up going down to base camp to recover, and the Japanese, once he saw what happened to their fixed lines, decided to go back to Japan. And
They're probably glad you went first too.
Yeah. And then we ended up, after recovering, we ended up just summiting by going back up and summiting by the Northeast Ridge, but we never, the east face never rose up. And that was my first exposure to climate change. That was in 1985, and since then, actually I've done some research, and scientists discovered, coined the term climate change 17 years earlier. So this has been recognized by some scientists, but not been recognized by the general public until relatively recently. And then when it came together for me, when I first noticed climate change, was in 2005, when I went to climb the Diamond Kularo Mount Kenya. Mm-hmm. And we wanted to climb the Diamond. We didn't think it was going to be in, because it hadn't been in for like the last 9 years. I mean, years before that, the ice curtain that it was most famous for had fallen off and had never reformed. And so we thought, well, we'll just go climb a classic route on the northeast, I think it's a northeast face, and then the Diamond's on the southwest face. We'd go climbing the Diamond. If it was in, maybe put up some new routes. And we got there, and well, first, before we left the country, we heard, it might be in. So we brought our ice climbing gear. Then we got to the trailhead, and they're like, no, it's not in. It hadn't been in, it's gone. So we left our gear at the trailhead. Then we decided, oh, we'll just go circumnavigate the mountain as we hike in, and we to acclimatize, and we'll see for ourselves. And we could just see through the clouds that it might be in. And in fact, it was in what you would call modern conditions. So what happened was we climbed the Eastern Groove, I think it was called, some route on the northeast side, and then we traversed around to the southwest side, and it was it's like the first pitch was pretty much no gear, no gear. But Jay was able to hammer in some P times. So he was having to sort of aid while he was hammering in P times on the lead, right? And then when I was climbing, it was like, okay, I got to get all of these out. First of all, because we might need them for the descent, for the wrapping the route. And second of all, because we had invited Jim Donini and Brad McMillan with us. And if I left these pins in, then they would come back the next day and climb it all free and be like, yeah, wasn't that bad, So it's like, no, gotta get these pins out so they'll know what it's really like.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, anyway, there's this one that Jay placed in the back of this corner, and how to get a piton out, normally you have to bang it back and forth. Well, there wasn't any room to bang it back and forth. And so, and I knew I shouldn't have done it, but like I slipped the pick of my tool in this piton to lever it out, and it came out. So I'm stoked,
Mm-hmm.
And so then I got up, and then the next lead was my lead. And so I went on, started climbing. We got to the end of the rope. It wasn't that hard. It's ice climbing, So I'm just like, just start climbing, So we're simul climbing, swung my tool, and it bounced off the ice. So I looked at my tool, and sure enough, the pick had broken. So I had to put in an anchor and then and bring Jay up. And then I had to give up all the rest of my leads for the rest of the climb because, I'm like, Jay, maybe, the next lead that's my turn, you could just climb with one tool and I could borrow one of yours. But he's like, no, because you might break that pick too. And then what will we do? We'll be like up a river without a paddle or something. So anyway, but that's when it struck me that I've done routes that may not get a repeat, and that climate change is real. And yeah, so that was what started me on this on the whole idea of last ascents.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a bittersweet, difficult thing to think about. Thinking that you could be the last person that ever climbed this thing that you found so much beauty in, and thinking that other people couldn't experience that too.
Right, and so what it did for me is it brought it home, and because before I'd read about polar bears, ice melting, and but it down at the South Pole or whatever, and it didn't really strike home to me. But when I saw it for myself in the mountains, and I thought about how closely it does hit home to me, then it really started having an effect on how I think about all the decisions that I make in terms of sustainability. But also I remind me, because I do want to come back to bringing it home, because again, while we sort of are focused on COVID, this has been brought home to me again. So remind me to tell you about that.
Absolutely. Yeah, like your discussion with Patagonia. Yeah, we can definitely. I want to hear about that. I'm really curious.
Yeah, but I wanted to tell you one more story real quick, and that was about I was invited to give a talk about last ascents, you know?
Mhm.
No, it was even before that. It was when I'd been invited to give a talk, the keynote speaker at the Banff Film Festival. And, and, and we needed to think about, yeah, that's when it all started. What my story is, you know, what my life story is really.
Mhm.
And my life story is, has been voluntary simplicity. It's about being focused on what really matters, because I don't want to waste my time on things that don't matter. I feel
Mhm.
like life is short. We never know. You know, I mean, you could be killed tomorrow, you could die
Mhm.
tomorrow. You don't know.
Mhm.
And so then um, that again affects the way that I look at life and every decision that I make. But um,
Is that concept of voluntary simplicity, is that just like physical possessions? Does it go beyond that? It's a kind of like the
yeah, no,
entire
it
ethos.
does. Yeah. So so want to tell a story really quick about the casino, because that's where it sort of comes to light. And then I want to tell you more about voluntary simplicity. Um, so in 1985, Colin Grissom and I went to climb the casino, and we our plan was to climb the normal route, the West Buttress route, to get acclimatized and to leave a cache of food and fuel up at 17. And we also left a cache down where you start up the northeast fork of the Kahiltna, and that we would pick up when we went up to climb the casino. So we went up, acclimatized, left the cache at the base of the northeast fork of the Kahiltna, and up at 17 on the West Buttress. Came down, and then we were gonna dig up our cache, pack up, try to get some sleep that night. The night before a climb, I mean, I really can't sleep. You know, I'm just filled with butterflies, and yeah, it's just sort of the worst place to be. It's really once you take your first step, you know, things just start falling into place, and it's so much better because the butterflies start disappearing. But so anyway, we dug up the cache, and all of our Snickers bars are gone. So yeah, it's like, well, so somebody dug up our cache and they stole all our Snickers bars.
They just took the Snickers bars, nothing else.
Yeah, 40 of them. And we were dependent on those for calories. I mean, that's it was definitely my go-to source for calories.
Mhm.
And based on some other previous experiences. And so anyway, so we're pretty devastated, because that was pretty critical. But you know, we carried on, and in May, that's when we were climbing the casino. It's super cold, you know. So we ended up uh, climbing at night and sleeping during the day, because it was the only way we could sleep. But even then, we were just catching sleep when we could. Remember, it's light 24 hours a day there, and to,
Mhm.
to climbing up through the first part of the climb, the Japanese couloir, took us like 17 hours nonstop, till we got to a place where we could stop and, you know, bivouac. And then we carried on, and I think we had 5 days of food and fuel with us. We encountered a 2-day storm, which we had to ration food and fuel then. And then we got up to our last camp at 19,000 feet, and we ate dinner. We had one meal left. We had breakfast, and then we were going to summit that day, and then come down to our cache at 17 on the West Buttress. So we packed up, started started up and this big storm came in from the other side of the mountain that we couldn't see. And it was massive. And so we had to go back and set up camp, and we had no food and no fuel left. Well, hardly any fuel, no food. So we started, well, there was nothing we could do. Colin got cold. He started shivering. He lighted up the stove to warm up the tent. And I said, what are you doing? Like, we don't have any fuel to make water. And he's like, well, I'm cold. I'm like, well, let me get in the sleeping bag with you. And he looked at me and I wasn't looking very good. You know, I mean, like dirty hair and stuff. And
Yeah,
he's
probably been a
like,
couple weeks. Yeah.
yeah. And he was like, no, like the sleeping bags aren't compatible. The zippers aren't compatible. I'm like, let me try. And anyway, so we only had enough fuel to make 2 cups of water per person per day. And then at one stage, I mean, you got to realize he's a big guy, like 167-pound All-American wrestler.
Mhm.
And he was used to fasting. And he said, give me the trash bag. And he ripped open the empty Lipton cup of soup packets and started licking them. And it made me realize, you know, how desperate our situation was. And we only had enough fuel to make 2 cups of water per person per day. So at the finally the storm ended after 5 days, and we were so weak, so lethargic. It was really hard to move. And so we decided to ditch everything that we absolutely didn't need. Like, we left our helmet. So we left any weight that we could, our second ice tools each. And we looking over at Colin, trying to lace his crampons securely over his overboots, you know, and he didn't even have the strength to, neither one of us, you know, and to lace our crampon straps. And truly desperate. And I actually had this one Snickers bar that I had hidden in case of an emergency, and considered that emergency. So so I gave it to Colin, and he scarfed it down, and we climbed up to a point that we realized we were going to make it, and we used up all the rest of the fuel that we had. And so we were able to get a quart of water apiece. And until that time, I was having these fainting, you know, dizzy spells. And so I just, when I felt it come over me, I just like plunge my ice axe in, close my eyes, and just try to hold on and not fall and pull us off the mountain, you know. And when we got a quart of water to drink, we felt a lot better when we were able to make it to the top of the Cassine and back down the other side. And from that expedition, what I really remember, what I really felt, was this freedom of knowing what you can do without. Mm-hmm. And I think that's really important. I mean, it's important in terms of us thinking about sustainability of our planet, of the Earth's ability to sustain us and the next generation, and the next and the next. And it's gotten to, you know, a breaking point. You know, it's getting there. Mm-hmm. With climate change. And there's a real urgency now. And Patagonia has recognized that urgency. And as such, they've, or in recognition of that, they've changed their mission statement to save the home planet. So anyway, that's
a powerful way to come to that realization about how much you can do with so little. I mean, that's like such a physical, powerful thing that you experience, but I think that we could all take some of that and bottle it up and kind of benefit from the concept of, you know, we don't necessarily need all these things that we think that we need. It's kind of a good way to like purify purify body and mind too. Just living a little bit more simple and austere.
Right.
That's incredible.
Yeah. So, there's a good website called the Simplicity Collective. So they talk about voluntary simplicity because you asked me about that.
Mhm.
So it says voluntary simplicity or simple living is a way of life that rejects the high consumption, materialistic lifestyles of consumer cultures. It does not mean, however, living in poverty, becoming an ascetic monk, or indiscriminately renouncing all the advantages of science and technology. Rather, advocates of simplicity suggest that by examining afresh our relationships with money, material possessions, the planet, ourselves, and each other, the simple life of voluntary simplicity is about discovering the freedom and contentment that comes with knowing how much consumption is truly enough.
Yeah, that's a succinct way to put it. I think now too, during this time when we're all quarantining and self-reflecting on what's important in our lives right now, it's kind of a good time to step back too and realize that maybe we don't need those things that we thought that we needed, and realizing kind of the fragile world that we live in, and just focusing on what truly matters. I wanted to circle back and ask you some questions about, so I really appreciated when you said like the first time that you personally really experienced climate change. I think that's an interesting point to bring up, because I've seen the videos of polar bears on melting ice flows, and it's all very abstract because most of us don't get to go see it. So I think it's really important that people like yourself and other adventurers that go out to these places that other people can't go to, that you choose to take that experience to kind of become an ambassador to let people know that it really matters. And that's sort of kind of like what Protect Our Winters does. Is that kind of how it was founded?
Yeah, except that, when I go and give these slideshows called Last Ascents, then there are always people that come up to me and telling me their own stories that they've experienced on their own journeys or in their own backyard or state, and they could be it could be climate areas, or it could be just the more frequent massive floods that have occurred in their states,
Mm-hmm.
or the more frequent massive fires that have occurred in their states. And so we do see it with increasing frequency and intensity, no matter where we live.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good point to bring up. I
Yeah,
think it's easy to forget that climate change has enormous effects on different realms of climate too, that we definitely all are feeling.
and then there are other things that can be taken place as a result of climate change that we don't directly see or hear about. But for example, like coffee, this is climate change is affecting your morning Joe, because it affects where what kind of coffee beans can be grown where, when,
Needs a cooler
and
climate typically. Yeah. Yep.
yeah, and water, the drought. And so there's that. But then there's increase in tension throughout the world when as a result of climate change. And that tension affects, say, agriculture,
Mm-hmm.
and then a person's ability to survive. And so then there, can be increased, as a result, increased migration or immigration, and increased terrorism, etc. And climate change used to be listed as one of the top 10 security threats to the United States. There was a good documentary made about that. I can't remember the name of it right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it just leads to the shortage of resources and just general
Exactly.
global instability.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think about? I've seen a lot of mention in the news lately with this, with COVID-19 pandemic. We're seeing a reduction in smog in LA and Beijing, like the skyline is visible. Do you have any thoughts on just kind of this short-term effect of a reduction in climate change, or what that means overall?
Yeah. So you can't talk about, I don't think, like, oh, well, one of the silver linings of climate change is that there's reduced air pollution, because, lives have been lost and jobs have been lost and businesses have failed. So it's too high of a price to pay. And I think that what you can talk about is, what we see is the power that we have when we act together to counter a challenge like COVID-19. And when we all act together, we can make a difference. So we've seen that in a powerful way, and it starts from the bottom up. Real lasting change doesn't happen from the top down. It's people, it's from the bottom up, people recognizing that, hey, there's a problem, but you know what? I can make a difference. And if everybody does this collectively, we can change the course of, whatever. And so it comes to people taking responsibility for themselves in terms of wearing a face covering and practicing social distancing, and buying into it. And together we can conquer this thing. And it's such a powerful illustration of how we can take on something massive. And so we should be able to as a world. And you see, this also is not just like my problem or your problem. This is a global problem. And if we act like, and it shows also how not only the power we have individually when we act together, but also that it is not just my problem or the United States problem. This is a global problem, and it shows in a powerful way how one thing does actually unify and connect us all.
That's beautifully put. And I think if we could somehow look at climate change with the same immediacy that we're looking at COVID-19 as, I think that people could unify, and take the correct action to actually course correct. It just
yeah. Which the thing is that, again, in this, while we're all focused on health and the economy, and rightfully so, the thing is that we can't take our eyes off of the need to vote in the fall, because while this is going on, there have been some changes going on that we may not be paying attention to because we're so focused on climate change. I mean, on the COVID thing. But for example, I just got a letter from the Access Fund on Tuesday that says, here's one: massive oil and gas lease sale threatens Moab's recreation and economy. On the heels of the notorious attempt to lease the world famous Slick Rock mountain bike trails out for oil and gas development, the administration is now considering leases for more than 100,000 acres in the Moab region. Dozens of high-quality climbing and mountain biking areas are threatened, as well as areas important to river runners, hikers, campers, and motorized recreation. The administration's aggressive energy dominance policies, combined with the current low price of oil, all-time low, mean just one interested bidder in the BLM's September auction could lay claim to more than 100,000 acres of recreation-rich lands around Moab, keeping them tied up in oil and gas leases for decades.
Like, yeah, and that seems to be, you hear about that in the news often now, which is a sad reality and a real truth that we have to push towards renewables right now.
Yeah, so the problem is that we can't keep our eye off the ball at the same time and that being the need to vote in November, because we can't keep our eye off the ball because we're so focused on COVID-19. But again, what COVID-19 has shown us is the power that we have, to tackle problems that are huge and that affect not just us, but it shows how connected we are with each other and the rest of the world.
I wanted to circle back to, so you said you had a discussion with Patagonia today or yesterday, like pretty recently, right? You just had a...
Yeah, today.
We also had a question too. What's Patagonia's new mission statement? You said that they changed their mission statement.
Yeah, to save the home planet.
Save the home planet.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Do you want to talk about what you discussed with them at all today, or?
Well, today was just about, changes that they're having to make because furloughs that they're having to go through during this time with the COVID thing, but what's still important for them is connection to the communities, and fighting together to save our home planet and to get out and vote. It's just it's just super important. And like I said, we can't take our eyes off the ball because stuff like this, is like what I just read about the oil leases, behind our backs.
And so Patagonia, they support, or it's Action Works through Patagonia, where they support just local grassroots groups that are working to affect political change in environments throughout the country, right? So that's something that folks can donate to and volunteer for, I believe, or... Yeah,
it's more about political activism and get out the vote and right, and being involved in local projects.
Do you have any like easy suggestions for someone that's trying to live a life of voluntary simplicity? Is there like an easy a simple thing that you could throw out to be like, think about this next time you do this?
I actually am always, it's kind of like triage, I'm always get up in the morning and I think about, okay, what are my priorities for today? And so that because otherwise, things are endless, right? Things, you can get sucked in so many directions, and it is fun to see where you end up if you just follow all these rabbit holes. But at the same time, your time and energy is limited. And so I think that's why I think that it's important to take the time, and that's supposedly what we've been given now with COVID-19, although I haven't fully experienced it, though I have experienced some, definitely some blessings, but it's important to take the time to reflect on what it is that really matters to you so that you can choose how you want to spend your time and your money or your, resources, your energy. And and then the rest of it becomes less important and it doesn't bother you as much. It just doesn't take up that space, that head space.
Hmm.
Yeah. Or
Yeah,
time.
it's nice for all of us right now to not have to worry about anything more than we have to worry about anyway. You know, nice to kind of free your mind to the other things that don't really matter.
Or that you don't have control over.
Yeah, true. Yep. I was personally kind of curious. So you're from South Carolina
Yeah.
and you're in Hawaii right now,
All right.
but you got into going to these cold, brutal, lunar environments. Like what got you into alpinism in the first place?
Well, there's another Snickers bar story. So I was at school at University of Vermont because there's a lot of really good downhill ski in there,
Hmm.
and I got tired of standing in lift lines, so I got to go ice climbing, and I decided that I liked that it was well, really beautiful, and you didn't have to stand in lift lines. Really challenging,
Hmm.
yeah, and really adventurous. And so right before I finished school, there was a guy, I didn't really know him, but he and asked me if I wanted to do the presidential traverse um, on a full moon. It was in late November, so basically winter conditions.
Hmm.
And so I said, yeah. And in a single push. So then I started thinking, well, what's the worst thing that could happen? And then I thought, well, the worst thing that could happen is, somehow he could get injured above tree line. And then what would I do? So then I figured, well, I'd have to get in a sleeping bag with him, but I wasn't attracted to this guy. So I'm just like, okay, you're gonna have to bring a sleeping bag. And so anyway, so then, sure enough, well, we ended up post-holing. We didn't know the snow was going to be that deep, so we had left our snowshoes back in the car, um, and it was quite strenuous. And we burned through most all our calories that we had with us. And he was getting hypothermic, and it was after midnight, and we were getting near. Well, we got to the top of Mount Washington, and there's an observatory up there, and it was locked up, but there was sort of an inside corner that was sheltered from the wind. So there was sort of a wind drift there, and a little place that he could be out of the wind. And so I said, okay, just go to sleep here for a couple hours. I'm going to stay awake and watch over you. And then I'll get you up, and we'll keep going, or we were going to bail at that point. So I fell asleep. And when I woke up, I was shivering cold. It was the most beautiful fiery red sunrise I've ever seen, and just amazing. But I was shivering uncontrollably, so I started doing jumping jacks to warm up, but I didn't warm up. So then I grabbed a Snickers bar and ate a Snickers bar, and literally within minutes I got warm. So that's the thing. You got to have calories to burn. You can't just warm up by doing jumping jacks. But anyway, so you got to have a Snickers bar with you, right?
Hmm.
So then, yeah, then I became interested in alpine climbing. So I moved out west, and well, I finished school in the winter, and then in December, and then I moved out west, and I lived out of the back of my Subaru, and I was gonna spend like January in Colorado, February in Wyoming, March in the Cascades, April in the Palisades, just alpine climbing. And I was gonna live. I only brought two of everything I needed with me, so because I didn't want stuff to get lost, but it'd be
Hmm.
easy to find if I only had two of each. So two pairs of socks, two long sleeve shirts, whatever. And then I had and I was gonna live on $3,000 a year. So I got those out in traveler's checks. So that meant like $14 a week for food. So yeah, no movies, no beer. Um, and yeah,
Damn.
so
That's
I did that, learned a lot.
That seems like you've had a good knack for voluntary simplicity. That's pretty impressive. Living on $3,000 for a year. Also, if you don't get free Snickers bars, you should. They should be sending you free Snickers bars
I know.
For the glowing endorsements for it.
Yeah.
Do you want to chat a little bit about Chicks Climbing and Skiing? So you're one of their guides, part owner. Can you just tell the folks kind of what that organization is all about, what you guys do?
Yeah, thanks. So Kim Reynolds started the business in 1999. She was walking through the Ouray Ice Park and noticed that there weren't many women climbing, and of the ones that there were climbing, they were just standing around watching their partners, usually men, set up the anchors or lead or whatever. And she's like, this has got to change. So she started Chicks with Picks, and it was all ice climbing clinics, all women taught by women, small groups, multi-day, and with the goal of teaching women to be competent, independent climbers. And since then she added rock climbing, and then 4 or 5 years ago, some of the guides, including myself, Angela Haas, Elena Renz, and Karen Backel, bought the business, and we added alpine climbing and backcountry skiing. And what I've learned through it was actually through a presentation that a woman, Joanne Deeks, did on a book she had written, How Girls Thrive, is that women learn better in all women's environments because they're less intimidated to ask questions. And I have started to notice that those who ask the most questions seem to be actually the smartest people.
That's great. Do you guys have any events planned right now? I know it might be difficult planning anything, but do you guys typically do you do like expeditions or trips, or how do you guys plan events like that?
We do. We have a schedule up online, and we had to cancel April trips to Indian Creek and Joshua Tree, but we have a clinic the 3rd week of June at City of Rocks. And and it looks like, if all goes well, the state of Idaho will be in the phase of recovery in which we will be able to operate, because we just do small groups anyway, and we'll have protective recommendations and protocol that we'll be following in place. And then we have a trip to Mount Baker or Mount Washington, actually 2 trips, beginner intermediate level on the south side, and a intermediate advanced level on the north side later in July. And I just got word that if all goes well, the state of Washington will be in phase 3 during that time, and we would be able to run those trips. So that's exciting news. Here's hoping that people will continue to take, personal responsibility and wear face coverings, practice social distancing, and wash hands frequently, and surfaces, that are used a lot, whatever. Yeah,
that's awesome, and I want to commend and thank you too for the work that you do with Chicks Climbing, because representation is so important for inclusion, to have people see strong leaders in a sport that they can kind of aspire to be like, and that's really important work to make climbing equitable for everybody. It's awesome.
Well, yeah, and then what really stood out to me, I was listening to John Long last week. He was awesome. And what really stood out was when you guys asked, what were the biggest things that he's gotten out of climbing. And he said one was the interactions with his climbing partners. So, that's interactions with others are super important. I started thinking about that myself. And then climbing outdoors, and it doesn't matter how hard, but it's fun climbing indoors. And I'm a kind of person who is real adaptable. So whatever I start doing, then it just becomes my favorite thing in the world, you know, and I forget about what used to be my favorite thing in the world to do, you know. And so I'll be in the gym and I'll be like, God, I could be happy forever. You know, this is so cool. Like, just don't take the gym away from me. But then now, you know, now I'm outdoors. I'm like, man, you know, like I gotta have outdoors. I mean, what if I lived somewhere and I wasn't allowed to go outdoors? Like in some cities, maybe it's like that for them. I don't know, but I can't imagine. It's such a connection to me, and such a, yeah, it is a source of inspiration and I guess who I am. And
and spending time outdoors too, it really cements the idea like inside of us that we have to protect those spaces. Like if you don't spend time in them, then you know you won't realize what you're missing when they're gone too. So I think it's really important for that level of connection.
yeah, and I don't even have to be climbing. I don't even have to be walking. I could just be sitting here on the porch and watching the geckos climb up the posts, you know, or run across the lawn, or the little kitty cat over there underneath the bush sleeping in the, you know, and
Making me a little bit jealous, going
yeah,
through all
sorry,
those things
sorry,
right
sorry.
now. But no, it's beautiful here too. It's beautiful.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, that's
it's
great.
special, huh?
Do you? We actually had a question from someone. Do you have a scar from that rope burn you were talking about earlier on?
Yeah, but I don't know if you can see it. But it's like, oh, I'll always have a scar. It's 2 inches long, right there in the crease of my elbow, you know?
Oh wow. Oh, that's a tough spot to heal too, in the crease of your elbow.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I didn't, you know, I didn't know it was, I took off my clothes except for my long johns, you know, because I was up at altitude. I was always sleeping in my long johns. I saw rope burns through my jacket, you know, my Gore-Tex jacket and my fleece jacket. And I might have had on another layer, I can't remember, but then my Poly Pro back in those days. And I saw this hole in my Poly Pro, and I took off my shirt and I saw this hole, and I'm like, oh, I can't
Oh,
look at it. You know, and I showed it to Colin, who is training to be a doc, and I'm just like, Colin, you got to take care of this, you know, like, deal with it. But like it wasn't even a part of me because I didn't want to acknowledge it.
yeah. If you don't look at it, it's not there. Right?
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Um, can you give us any good advice for like any aspiring alpinists? Like I'm definitely far from a mountaineer. I don't know if I have it in me, but just for anyone out there that might be interested in getting into mountaineering and alpinism, do you have any good advice for them?
Well, you know, like I had no idea where that whole journey was going to take me, because first of all, I wasn't interested in climbing. I was afraid of heights. I had no idea that I would be sent outside of the country to work as part of my career, because I became an international mountain guide. Um, no idea that I would be given talks, you know, presentations, because, you know, everybody, I mean, speaking scary, because then everybody knows what you think. But, you know, one thing just sort of led to another. So it's such a great adventure, and it's so great to be in that place where when you don't have any idea, no preconceived notions, you just go where it takes you. So I just say, just get out there. And definitely, I believe in doing your homework, you know. So I always am really thoughtful about where I go, do all the research, who my climbing partners are. You know, they have to have similar tolerance for risk, you know, and be team players. But then just so I do the research, but then I just see where it takes me. And that's just what's so cool about adventure and being open to what the next day brings.
Yeah, I think there's some beautiful metaphor in there where it's like, you know, if you can climb a mountain, you can do anything else. You can tackle other little mountains in your life, and it probably just kind of opens you to this beautiful world of trying new things, you know.
Yeah.
We just got a question from someone. This is a Lord knows we all probably have them, but is there anything in your life that you do differently at all? Like anything that you've done that you would have done differently?
Yeah.
I could probably think of 3 things every day in my life, but just
Oh
an
God.
overarching one.
Uh, yeah. I mean, my life was on sort of a track, and and then then I got divorced, and it ended up on another track. And actually, it was sort of on a track, and this COVID has put me on yet another track that has been really, really great. And I guess I'd like to talk about that. And that is that, when uh, Jay, my husband, is a really good climber, right? And a really good rock climber. And so, and I've always had a problem actually with self-confidence. And so, you know, he'll lead something and I'll be like, yeah, I don't know if I can lead that, and because he's a better climber than me, and it's hard for him. So how am I going to lead it? And so I started climbing more with women at Chicks, and women are super supportive of each other. And with Jay, it was just kind of like, well, I mean, I got to dig deep inside myself to get what I need to make myself go for it or whatever. And one day early on in this trip here, we were out climbing, and he's like, "I'm going to give this a go." And I said, "Okay." So I belayed him, and then he came down and he said, "You want to lead it?" And I just said, "Okay, why not?"
Hmm.
And I led it like clean, And so ever since then, I've made myself lead everything that he leads clean. And it's just been a real change in sort of, it's like how we were when we first got together. And so I think, and when I first came here, it was like, because I've been so busy with work that I haven't actually spent that much time with him. And now that and so this could have gone either way, right? I mean, I'm sure everybody who's listening is in the same boat. Like, whoa, now you're stuck with the person that
Hmm.
um, you're really going to get on each other's nerves, or it's going to be really good.
Hmm.
And for me, it's turned out really good. And actually, I know some others who for them it's also turned out really good. And it's like, wow, that's so cool. Like families are tighter than ever before,
Hmm.
and that's the basis of society. And yeah, it's just really
Yeah,
cool.
I've kind of felt that, this unification between. I mean, I've been calling friends that I haven't called in years, and it's like, it's just really beautiful to kind of like reforge these connections in our solitude
Mhm.
right now.
Yeah.
We had another question come in. Is there anyone that really inspires you?
Oh God, not one particular person. It's they tend to be people that are um, just everyday people that are are trying like me to find the balance between all the different things are tugging at our heartstrings, and still just keeping going and trying to keep, I think, a positive attitude. For me, that's one thing that's super important because it's so easy to get down, and we can't do anything if we're down. We can't do anything if we're angry, if we're depressed.
Hmm.
The only time we have power is when we are positive and encouraging and supportive and forgiving.
That is incredible. That I don't know if we can top that to wrap this up here. That's so beautiful. I think all of that ties in, to COVID and to fighting climate change. Like if we despair and lose hope, it's impossible to make change.
Right, we'll lose.
Well, that's beautiful. Kitty, it's been incredible talking to you. You're I could probably listen to you tell stories for the next 6 hours. It's been awesome. I want to remind people too. So please donate money to Protect Our Winters or POW. We're going to have links on Facebook as well as Instagram. Also, we'll have that link posted to Patagonia, where you can get involved with the Action Works. Do not forget to vote, like Kitty talked about. That's really important. It's easy to get distracted with other things happening now, but November is coming up soon. Make sure you vote. We're also selling those T-shirts from the Only Blasphemy from last week as well, the John Long story that he told, and profits will benefit POW as well. So please check those out. And lastly, we have a tip jar available on it's in our bio on Instagram, also on Facebook too. If you guys want to throw any support out to our staff, that's really, really helpful during these times here. We love all you guys. We miss you. We want to see you soon. Kitty, thank you so much. I hope you have lovely things planned in Kauai to do for the rest of the day here.
Thanks, y'all.
Cool. Take care.
Okay.